We're now on full automatic in the hands of the computers.
Get off my back, my back, my back, my back, my back. Get off my back. Is insane. Oh man! Oh! Whole thing is insane. My back. Get off my back.
I have brought more evil upon you.
I can't help thinking somewhere in the universe there has to be something better than man.
Human beings behaving humanly. Brilliant.
And now, coming to you with a special announcement, just a reminder, the teachers of Winslow Township are committed to come to you with the latest in technology, both audio and visual, to deliver the most enhanced, most sophisticated, most up-to-date intellectual experience possible. Your satisfaction is guaranteed. Stay tuned for the latest installment in your class, English, Language and Literature. Okay, here we are with Act 1, Scene 2. This is going to be part 1 of probably 2 on this scene. What I'd like you guys to do is to read this scene up until about line 185 on page 25. So basically, the scene is where you're going to meet the main characters. This is Caesar and his entourage, and they're coming into our scene, and they're headed to a race. They're going to watch the holiday foot race for the Lupercal, which was a Roman holiday that they celebrated by having a sprinting. So as you can see, there's me training for my marathon there. When they say Anthony is stripped for the race, basically he's wearing running clothes because he's going to be one of the guys who's running in the race for the Lupercal. So we have Mark Antony there. He's another general. He's a supporter and a protege of Caesar. A protege means you're like the student, the person who's being prepared to take over of Caesar. The older guy there is Caesar with his arm out. And then Calpurnia comes in. That's the wife of Caesar. And you may remember her, the character in To Kill a Mockingbird was named after her. Right? So these guys are coming in. They're part of Caesar's entourage. They are close by him. And they're followed by Brutus, who's this noble, respected senator of Rome. He's going to be one of our main characters in the thing. He is our main character. You think it would be Caesar, but it's going to be Brutus. And he's well known for being honest, and his integrity is unmatched. And he's followed by his wife, Portia, who we're going to meet more of later. There's another Brutus. This is Decius Brutus. He's another Roman senator, and he's a shifty guy. He's a very manipulative person. You got to keep your eye on him. And then Cicero, the famous orator Cicero, he's also in the entourage. Most of Shakespeare's audience would be familiar with Cicero. They would know who he was from his famous speeches. And then you would have Cassius, who's going to be another main character. He's Brutus's brother-in-law, and he is Mr. Drama. His outbursts are going to be a big part of the play. You're going to see him as the kind of guy that flips out at the drive-thru because they didn't give him onion rings, right? And then there's Casca, who I picked Forky for because he's a knucklehead just like Forky, and we'll get into more of him as we get into the second half of this scene. Also, there's the soothsayer. No, wait, that's not the soothsayer. This is the soothsayer. The soothsayer, sooth means truth, right? And a soothsayer is kind of going to be a wise man, like a psychic, someone who's on like the fringe of society, probably someone, this guy's a little polished up in this picture. He would probably be a little on the homeless side, a little, out there. If you remember Tiresias from Antigone, if you read that with Mrs. Frida, that character is very similar to the soothsayer. He's like a prophet, someone who tells the future. So basically, they're off to see the race, right? So one of the superstitions about this race is that the barren, or people that can't bear children, right, will shake off their sterile curse if touched by one of the racers, right? So if you're having trouble bearing children, you go down to the sideline and you touch one of the racers who's racing in this holy race, and you may be able to conceive after that. You'll be granted fertility. So Caesar wants his wife to stand by the side and make sure that she catches Antony as he comes around the corner, and maybe she'll be able to bear him an heir. So it's interesting that Caesar is this powerful general, and yet he's still got some of this superstition happening. So as they're watching the race, out comes the soothsayer. Wait, that's not the soothsayer. The soothsayer comes out and he says, "Beware the Ides of March." Right? And what are Ides? Ides are certain holiday days of the month, and this particular March date is the date that he tells Caesar to beware of. And Caesar's kind of freaked out by that, and he gets everyone to be quiet, has the man brought in front of him and says, what do you say to me now? Is it, when you have me right face to face, can you say the same thing? And he does. He simply says, "Beware the Ides of March," right? And it's kind of a creepy thing. And Caesar looks at him, decides he doesn't believe in it. He says he's a dreamer, and then let's go, let's walk out. So Caesar's kind of complicated. He's superstitious in terms of believing in the powers of the Lupercal race, but when it comes to the powers of the soothsayer, he's not buying it. All right. So as the entourage goes off, it gives Cassius a moment to talk to Brutus. They have a private conversation, probably off to the side, and you can hear the crowd at different points. During this conversation, off stage, these two characters will pause what they're saying, and they'll kind of listen and wonder, hey, what's happening over there, But one of the things that Cassius says, he takes this opportunity, and he says, talking about Caesar coming home and the circumstances, he says, there's many of the best respect in Rome, other famous people, except immortal Caesar. Speaking of Brutus, groaning underneath this age's yoke, hath wished that noble Brutus had his eyes. Hinting that there's people that are looking to Brutus for leadership, wishing that Brutus would take hold of the situation and do something about this mounting concern over Caesar and his getting more and more powerful. And Brutus is kind of cagey. I mean, this is an interesting thing that neither one of them are willing to openly speak out about Caesar behind his back right away, because Caesar's this tough, vengeful, vindictive character who's known for not tolerating people that don't agree with him, right? So Cassius goes on and does this whole monologue, really, where he's berating Caesar. And he says, at one time he almost drowned and I had to save his life. And then another time he had a fever and he almost died and he was whimpering like a young girl, And then he kind of sums the whole thing up. He says, "Why, he doth bestride the narrow world like a colossus." This weak guy who's the same as any other man now is like the Colossus. And the Colossus was one of the wonders of the ancient world. It was supposedly this statue at Rhodes in Greece that was as big as the Statue of Liberty, maybe bigger, and stood over the harbor, and ships used to sail in and out. So, he says, here we are peeping around at the feet of this great icon Caesar, looking for someplace to die, right? Wherein Caesar's dominating all of Rome. And then he follows up with one of my favorite lines in the play, which is, he says, "Men are at sometimes masters of their fates. The fault is not in our stars, dear Brutus, but in ourselves that we are underlings." So this is a really democratic sentiment here. He's saying, I don't believe in fate. We control our fate. And if we don't do anything, it's not because the stars dictated that we didn't do anything. It's because we were weak and we didn't act now and we didn't do anything to stop what was about to happen with Caesar. So he's baiting Brutus, trying to draw Brutus out and get him to speak about Caesar. And, one of these shouts happens off stage and he says, "Oh, what's going on? I fear the crowd is choosing Caesar for their king." And Brutus, like any good, or Cassius, like any good manipulator, listens to his words and says, "Aye, do you fear it? I would guess that you would not have it so." And basically he's saying, you don't want Caesar for your king. And Brutus says, "Yeah, I love the guy, but no, I don't want a king. I don't want any kind of end to the democracy in Rome." And then Cassius brings up this historical Brutus that I mentioned yesterday, this Junius Lucius Brutus that ran the Tarquin out of Rome, and brings up the fact that our Brutus in our story was named after him. And that's not lost on our Brutus. And he says, well, we'll talk about this later. And this is where we'll leave off. The rest of the entourage comes back from the race, and that's what we'll get into for tomorrow. Thanks.